morning and welcome. I'm Allison Page, and as those of you who are members who have been here before, you know we're a lay-led organization, and I will be leading the service this Sunday. Don is on his way up. We'll get started here in just a second. All right, I rang the bell. I took the liberty to ring the bell. Welcome for those of you who haven't been here before, and I know we have some newer attendees. When we get to the time where we have greet your next door neighbor and your visitors, we might do a round of introductions just because that's a nice way to get to know everybody who's a member here. Next slide. We welcome you. We know you come here for many different reasons: to find community, to seek your spiritual and your personal truths, to question, to nurture your heart and your soul, to be nurtured, to explore new ideas, to find comfort, and perhaps to find the answers to some of your bigger questions. Welcome. Now it's time to light the chalice. Do we have a volunteer? Come on up. Nope. Michelle, we have a younger. Whenever there's a younger volunteer, they take priority. Perfect. We can flip this slide to the next one. I love this poem. Out of the flames of fear, as we light the chalice, out of the flames of fear we rise with courage of our deepest convictions, to stand for justice, inclusion, and peace. Out of the flames of scrutiny, we rise to proclaim our faith, with hope to heal a fractured and hurting world. Out of the flames of doubt, we rise to embrace the mystery, wonder, and awe of all there is and all that is yet to be. Out of the flames of hate, we rise with the force of love, love that celebrates our shared humanity. Out of the flames, we rise. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to do introductions and welcome. Is it okay if we do a quick round?
Yeah, sure.
All right. You want to start, Carrie?
I'm Carrie Spatz.
All right, and Carrie is now serving and moving into serving as the treasurer of the organization and helping with so many things, including our technology and finances.
I'm Dr. Nelson. My family account, Lily again.
All right, welcome. Michelle?
I'm Michelle Foster. Kate Jones. Kate Ives.
All right, okay.
Jane Esch. It's my son Ellsworth. Lynn Houston.
Right.
I'm Bob.
And Bob is the president of the organization. Anna?
Anna Brown.
Right, and Anna Brown has been a member of this organization since it was born. No, member of a different UU.
Yeah,
Right.
I've just been used instead of
Okay. All right.
Prescott Bird.
Julia Tompkins.
I'm Alan Tuchtenhagen.
Speaker of the day. All right.
Peter Page.
Nancy Miller.
Rich Birdie.
Okay, thank you. Oh, and up in the loft, we have the one and only
John Lee.
Don Leek, also known as Deacon Don, who is a member of the board as well. And he and Ann, well, we can't even talk about everything they do for this organization. It's so much and so grand. Next slide. Oh, joys and concerns, we're there. Every Sunday we share and come on up and we drop a rock in the water for a joy or a concern that you have that you'd like to share this week. Come on up.
So, before, my sister said,
Would you like to use a mic?
oh yeah, sure. My sister said, Tempe, our cat, I think we should include all our animals. We have Tempe, Simmy, Piper, and Phoebe.
Oh, and they're a joy in your life.
Yep.
There you go. All right.
Thank you. Small stone for maybe a small joy. Paula emailed Don and me yesterday. She's doing a little better right now. So that felt really happy to hear that from her. doing better. So she's in my heart, and I'm happy for any good news from her.
Right. Now, for those of you who don't know Paula Luger is a longtime member of this organization, was a member of our board of directors, diagnosed this year with pancreatic cancer, and really having a little bit of a rough adventure.
So I have a bunch of joys and concerns, but our friend Marie Phillips and Maybelline aren't here because they've been doing a catechism with St. Francis in Ellsworth, and they're looking forward to coming back. And then Maybelline's dad is going to have jaw surgery this week. So I brought this, I told him I was going to gather up some good energy. I'm going to put this on the chair in the back, and anybody who wants to give a little boost to Dustin, Maybelline's dad, he's having jaw surgery.
I have a big, shiny, I don't know which microphone to talk in, big shiny joy for Jane, our daughter, and her son.
Yes. Hi, Scott.
This is a joy of returning of spring. Our had the Sandhill Cranes come in and spend their first night in our wildlife pond this week. So
Nice. Super nice. Other joys and concerns? Yes, I'll share a joy and a concern for my mom. I cry so easy. Who had a stroke last week. She's 99 years old. So the concern is she had a stroke, and she's, the road ahead is going to be challenging. The joy is that we were so blessed with such nice parents. Others? Yes, I'll put the big one in for all those joys and concerns that perhaps go unspoken. Next slide. Great. So, those of you who are UU members know that we believe that love is at the center of all things, with the principles that surround it of interdependence, equity, transformation, pluralism, generosity, and justice. Next slide. Love is at the center and the foundation. Again, we reground ourselves here in our highest values. Love is the center and foundation of this faith. Love is the power that holds us together as a community, because love is not only something we receive, but something we practice in community. Let us be accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. As we continue to listen and learn, to act and grow, may each unfold in wholeness, both deeply loving and truly loved. So our values and the theme of trust. When we think of this month's theme is trust, and we started the month talking about trust as ourselves as individuals and how we build trust in relationships. And what do we do when we're living in a society necessarily where we can't trust? How do we build trust? So today we're going to be talking about building trust in community. And when we look at what our values and which values really connect to building trust, my eye goes to interdependence. How can we build interdependence and really do interdependence without trust? But all of them, really. Any other thoughts on this, or which ones gravitate to your mind? Which values we connect to? All right, next slide. Interdependence, we honor the interdependent web of all existent and acknowledge our place in it. Pluralism, we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. Justice, we work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where we all feel welcome and can thrive. Transformation, we adapt to a changing world. Generosity, we cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. Equity, we declare that every person is inherently worthy and has the right to flourish with dignity, love, and compassion. So I think trust kind of weaves itself through all of these, but maybe particularly that first one. So building trust in community is the topic for the day, and we are very fortunate to have Alan Tuchtenhagen, who's a community member, here with us today. Next slide. All right, so Alan, I'm going to go to the bottom here. Alan has retired from his Associate Vice Chancellor position at UWRF and from Augsburg University as Director of the Center for Leadership Studies and a Master of Arts. Leadership Studies, a Master of Arts in Leadership. He served on the River Falls School Board for the last 17 years. So Alan and I serve together now on the school board, and he's just a fabulous, fabulous community representative for what we want in children's education. But in our current and divisive political environment, how does a local unit of government work to cultivate and sustain public trust? What do we do? How can those units effectively provide information and engage in discussions that are inclusive of the community at large? What is the culture of the board, and how does that affect community trust? Communication is critical, but navigating the plethora of media platforms is a challenge. How do you move forward when the very nature of the democratic process is in a local community means that everyone will not always agree? And particularly in times like now, you can't turn on the news without hearing a public education be attacked. Public education is the root of all evil, the root of progressive thinking. We need to rid the world of public education. So our institutions are being attacked. Our public schools have been under attack in full force since 2009 in the state of Wisconsin. And that makes it ever so much harder for a board of education, a public school system, to engage community and really have community support for the public schools. So Alan is going to talk us through just basically his approach and the Board of Education's approach to community, building trust in a community as one example of a local unit of government and how we build trust. So come on up, Alan. Go.
One of the things I like, because I've been an educator my whole life, I have a handout. And I want to tell you a little bit about that handout. Thank you, Allison, and thank you for inviting me today. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to you. What I'd like to do is to talk to you a little bit about this issue of trust, community trust. Talk about it as it plays out in our local school board here, and maybe give you some examples. But it'll also be a reflection of some of my thoughts and philosophies that sort of drive me as a community member being involved in a community organization like this, and what drives sort of what I think. So to start off with, there are a couple quotes, and we'll just have Don move through the quotes here as I read them. Okay, so this definition, I think you've got it on that handout. Community trust generally refers to the confidence and belief that residents have in each other and in local institutions to act in the community's best interests. It's crucial for thriving and cooperative communities. Definition: community trust encompasses the faith residents have in their neighbors, local organizations, and the overall system that serves the community. Now, that's in your handout, and there's a really nice layout there, okay? And as you look at it, I mean, I saw this as really good, and I can really say it's really good because I didn't do it. Right? Now, normally I would credit my sources, always credit my sources, but that whole document you've got in front of you right now, including the graphic, was all AI generated. 2 questions generated that. First, I went into Genesis and Google and said, give me a description of community trust and how it works. Boom, that's the thing you have in front of you right now with all the lists. Then I went to ChatGPT and said, just typed in, develop a graphic that reflects community trust. And that's the graphic it gave me, okay? So they're both original. So that's kind of interesting and scary at the same time, okay? Stacy, our board chair, and I both went to a session on AI in January at the state school board meeting. And so I kind of got onto this because there are obviously huge implications for schools and teaching and all kinds of stuff. Fact is, so I'm giving you the handout, but I'm not going to be talking from that handout. That's your resource to take it to your other organizations and groups in the community that you deal with. But I just think there's a lot of information out there. The world is awash with information. It's actually how we use it, and I think that's where issues of trust and community trust play an even bigger role in our role in it. So let's go, here's one. How many of you have read Road to Wisdom or are aware of Road to Wisdom? It's a really good book. This guy was the director of the CDC for many years. Actually, Fauci reported to him. But he talks about his own faith journey. He's actually an evangelical Christian who is pretty liberal in his philosophies, but just how he worked through a whole variety of things in his life. But more importantly, he really talks about the divisiveness in society, and he gives examples from his work and all of that. It's an excellent book. A couple quotes from this that he has, but just you can read it there. But trust needs to be actively cultivated, personally as well as in a community. And you can't demand it, okay? And you can't take it for granted. But we can't assume we have trust. This is often a challenge in local governments is you're really there, you're doing all the work, you're working hard, and you just assume everybody knows what you're doing. And why wouldn't they trust us? Why wouldn't they support this issue? Can't they see how much we're working, all that sort of thing? No, there needs to be a whole process that sort of keeps people actively engaged, knowing what you're doing and why you're doing it. And then when we lose trust, we lose our ability to work together to solve problems and to build a better future. I think those are two very quick ones. So, next quote. Martin Luther King. We must all learn to live together as brothers, or we will all perish together as fools. Or I could quote Benjamin Franklin, we'll all hang together or we'll all hang separately, right? But one way or another. Next quote. Helen Keller, alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. This isn't just school board stuff, this is always. We can't exist in this society as individual units, okay? We have to be part of a larger whole. Next quote. We all do better when we're all doing better. This is absolutely core to my belief. We all do better when we're all doing better. And it seems so natural to me, and there are a whole bunch of people who wouldn't agree with that, okay, fundamentally, okay, that, because for all of us to do better means sacrifice on the part of others, right? So we all do better when we're all doing better. And I think there's one more quote there. This was a tough one, because this was in 1861. We are not enemies. Eventually, we had to come to the conclusion we were enemies, all right? But initially, what was Lincoln's first instinct? We are not enemies. We must not be enemies. Though passion may be strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. Our bonds of affection were broken, and we fought 4 years, 700,000 lives. In today's terms, that would be the entire state population of Wisconsin. As a relative population, entire state. That's Civil War, okay? When the bonds break, this is the sort of thing that happens. So I think that's the last quote I've got there. So just let me move on and give you a couple of my quotes. You don't know what you don't know. And I think if anyone is going to build community trust and we're going to have organizations, there needs to be a spirit of we don't know what we don't know. Because if you really believe that and you embrace that, then you want to learn. And it's like, okay, well, I didn't know a whole bunch about school budgets, and if you want a Byzantine bureaucratic process, try and get into how the state runs its budget and funds schools and all those kinds of things. You get pretty complicated. That's one part of I don't know what I don't know. The other part of it is someone comes with an issue that I profoundly disagree with. Do I immediately dig in my heels and not listen to them? Or I don't know what I don't know, so what do they know that I don't know? There's a process of active listening here that comes with that, embracing that. Another quote of mine is, it's never enough just to be right. Or as I sometimes say, being right and $5 will get you a cup of coffee at Starbucks. Okay? As a member, I'm also a member of the board of directors for the Wisconsin State School Board Association, and I handle the orientation for all the new board members, West Central Wisconsin, basically Eau Claire over to this part of the state. So I'll be doing that in just a couple of weeks. But one of the biggest things we talk to new board members about is your one vote. Okay, most of you have 7-member boards. There's a few 5-member boards and a few 9-member boards, but almost all of us are 7-member boards. Okay, unless you can convince at least 3 other people to come along with you, so what? You got an opinion? You got an opinion. That's all you've got. Being part of, so how do we come to this? Because it's never enough just to be right, but it's important to understand that the alternative to being right is not necessarily being wrong. Okay. There may be more than one right. There may be some accommodation we can make here. Let's think, okay? But if you're a concrete thinker, okay, I mean, everything is right or not right, I've decided, okay, that makes it hard to build community trust because we aren't alike as humans. The species has evolved to be very, very, very different. And the nature of the democratic process is that it was never designed to be efficient. And that means we got to put up with all the crappiness that comes along with it, disagreements, different perspectives, all kinds of things. That's the nature of the democratic process, right? So part of this, to an extreme, we're seeing at a national and state level right now as to how divisive things are. Well, some of that comes with the territory. It's the nature of the beast. If you don't want that, let's just have a dictatorship and somebody can all tell us how to think, okay? If it's my dictator, then it's okay, okay? Then it's okay because then you just all have to come over to my side. But this notion of the fact that we're so different means we've got to carry on dialogue and we've got to come to some conclusions on some things. When I left UWRF Falls in 2011, I decided I wasn't ready to retire, so I did what's called, and for us boomers, an encore career, for lack of a better thing, and I took a job at Augsburg University for 10 years, as you saw up there. And one of the cool things about Augsburg was they had a theological approach that fit and paralleled very well a secular approach to life. There's the theological call is we're called. We have certain skills and we're supposed to share them. That's their theological approach. The secular approach is we're all good at something. Okay, we're all cut out to do something. And the way a society works is for us to share that and work together, right? So it could be a theological or a secular approach, one way or another. It fit for me. But the biggest thing I like, now this is an ELCA Lutheran campus, which is still tied to the Lutheran Church, which is the most diverse university campus in Minnesota, probably a 5-state region in terms of relative population. Highest Muslim population as part of their enrollment, all of that. That embraces all this with a great big banner in their lecture hall that says, "We are called to serve our neighbor." For them, it's a theological statement. But for everyone else, is how does a democracy work? How does the democratic process work? It's looking out for each other. Neighbor in the sense of not just that you live next to me. Neighbor is all of us who are around. We're called to serve our neighbor. That's it. I loved it. Okay, it was just here's what we're here for. So when I got to Augsburg, it kicked in. I don't know what I don't know, and boy, I was surprised at that stage in my life how much I still had to learn, and it was an interesting ride. I got to that. So I think those are the underpinnings of what I'm going to talk about in terms of some examples of how our school board functions and how that plays out for us. But this notion that for me, being on the school board is a calling, okay? The other is, in all the crazy things going on in the world, what can I do, okay? My wife said we're going to unsubscribe to the Washington Post the other day because she didn't like their change in editorial policy. Well, that's fine, but who cares? I mean, there's millions of people out there. Who cares if we subscribe to it or not? What can I do that makes a difference, I guess? So rather than unsubscribe to the Washington Post, which was my wife's idea, I thought, I can get my hand around one thing that I know I can do, and for me, it's serving on the school board. For you, it might be part of this congregation. It might be part of some other organizations. What is it that you can grab hold of and at least make a difference on part of it rather than feel frustrated? So I think that's where it goes with a lot of us. We have a very good board right now. It's a very functional board, which seems like shouldn't they all be functional? And I can tell you, being connected at the state level, a good share of school boards are not very functional right now. And part of the reason for that is the partisan interference with what we're doing. Both parties are extremely involved in local schools right now, and it isn't good. You're seeing all the ads and stuff now. It's the state Supreme Court race, the state superintendent race, all of that. So it's a real challenge at the local level. We've got a board that works from respect, so I'll kind of talk through that. As I mentioned earlier, never take public trust or approval for granted, and always remember it needs to be cultivated. Part of this is just the board chair sets the tone. You know, the board chair is a tough job, as Allison knows. She does it did it for years. Our current chair is Stacy Johnson Myers. I don't know how many of you know her. I can't sing her accolades enough. She is solid. She's unflappable. She's extremely bright, and very pleasant. So even in the most divisive stuff, and I'll make some remarks about how we got through COVID and some things about how she leads us, that helps set a tone for the board in terms of respecting each other and getting along. As we often talk about at the state level, what happens in the boardroom is reflected in the classroom. If the board doesn't get along, don't be surprised if you got problems in your classroom. So it's important for us to get along, and that just doesn't mean in a herd sort of mentality. I'll talk about how we do that in just a minute. But for us, we feel very gratified that we feel community support, but not unanimous support. Our community is very different. There's 18,000, almost 19,000 residents in our school district boundaries here, most of whom are eligible to vote, and they don't all agree. But in my time on the board, we've had 7 referenda questions, I think, and only one of them did not pass, and it lost by 24 votes. That was 15 years ago or so. But we can't take that support for granted ever, okay, ever. Support, community trust in an organization can take years to build, and you can lose it in 24 hours. What have you done for me lately? What did you do to me lately? Okay, I was really supportive of the board, but suddenly something happened to my kid, or I just opened my property tax statement, or I heard something went on with a coach, or there's a problem with a teacher in the classroom. All of a sudden, bang, it changes. So that's why I think you always need to be sensitive to it, not driven by it, but just always conscious of, don't just assume. When we do all the work to set up those referendum questions, it takes months, sometimes over a year, to winnow out all the information, come down to it, and then get to the point where we've had public input. The administration has talked about it in terms of priorities and what we need. The board has talked and talked. We brought in contractors, engineers to help us through facilities kinds of issues. And then we come to a proposal and we put it out there, and people start asking us some of the most basic questions. And you're like, well, of course we did this. Of course we did that. You know, you think we're stupid? I mean, that can almost be the first reaction to it. You can't assume that everybody knew what you were doing. So one of the ways I cope with that is to think, all of these are teachable moments. Okay? And even if we've told them 3 times, maybe the 4th time it'll make sense, because obviously it didn't connect the first 3 times. So it's kind of our obligation to make sure people understand. So for the last referendum, we're very fortunate. 2 questions passed a little over a year ago. We did over 40 information sessions around, at least the superintendent, typically 1 or 2 other central administrators, and at almost all of them, at least 1 board member. I was at over 20 of them, I think, whether there were 2 people or there were 50 people. They're answering questions, take the tough questions, those kinds of things. And this notion of committing to work together. Focusing on consensus is important, but we don't always have to have unanimous votes. But if there's a way for all of us to get on board with this, let's kind of work through that. Just because I think the roof doesn't need to be fixed, and 5 of you do think the board needs to be fixed, can we come to some accommodation? Maybe I got a lot to learn here, okay? But in the end, can we come to consensus? If not, can we at least get enough votes to move forward? I mentioned earlier you need 4 votes on a 7-member board to move forward. If you become a 4-3 board, your community's in trouble and your district's in trouble. Because we hold spring elections every spring. There's at least 2 board members up every spring. Your board members, so in the course of 12 months, you literally, because they go 2, 2, and 3 to get that. So 2 members are up, 2 members are up, then 3 members are up. Theoretically, in the course of 12 months, you could have the board flip by 5 members. Okay, you could have it flip by 1 member, and suddenly now everything's going different. So how are you going to keep good administrators if they feel like, you know, we're trying to do long-range planning, but the board keeps swinging back and forth all the time. The board can't get together on stuff. And heaven forbid that you would ever choose a new superintendent on a 4-3 vote. Okay, you just can't move forward without some agreement on this. So I think that's our board. So we keep talking until we can get to that point, and that means some of our committee meetings run long. You know, they just, because we're sort of talking through this. No drama. No drama has to be, I think, for any group involved in building community trust, you have to avoid the drama. And as we all know, there are some people who are just drama prone. You know, oh my gosh, the budget's short, or the state isn't coming through, or we got a problem with a teacher or coach or administrator or whatever, you know. Keep your head about you. And don't tolerate drama within the staff. It's not just the board, don't tolerate it within the staff. And especially as it comes to outside comments coming into us or emails coming into us or public comment, don't take the bait, okay? Whether intentionally or not intentionally, there will be incendiary stuff that comes up. Be careful that you don't step in it. Think through it before you immediately react and those kinds of things, because there are some people who would love to bait you and get you into an argument, and then suddenly nothing productive is happening. Give credit where credit's due. For any of you who have watched their board meetings, and by the way, they're on YouTube and they're all archived and they're all out there. So for those of you who love to watch things like board meetings, they're there. But anyway, you'll see that we do Wildcat Pride Awards just almost every meeting. We've got awards we're giving to groups. We ask at just about every regular board meeting, and certainly a lot of our committee meetings, we ask groups to come forward and present to us. So we've got the teachers working on some project and they're really proud of it. Let's let them present to the board, tell us about it so we know what's going on. And give them credit and thank them for being there. I think that's part of it. Give credit to the outside groups that support us. There's some service clubs and other groups in this community that are just really supportive to us, and make sure we're acknowledging them and showing our appreciation. Again, don't take it for granted. Transparency of information. Everybody agrees we need to be transparent, right? But transparency means different things to other people. So of all the information we did, we sent out flyers. You probably got it with information about the referendum. We had web pages with all the information out there. We did all those information sessions, and we still had people saying they're keeping this stuff from us. And then they would mention stuff that's been out there, we've talked about, etc. Different people have different ideas. Yeah, but you didn't tell me, okay? You didn't come and sit down with me and talk to me and tell me exactly what this was. So, but that's just the nature of the beast. That's part of this, and we've got to live with that. So, but when you put information out there, the world is awash with information right now. Put it in context and be aware of context. So you put our recent test scores out there. We better have something contextually around it, or people will misinterpret what's there. That's one of the biggest challenges. All board agendas, documents, reports, etc. are published prior to the meeting, so our whole agenda and the supporting documents are out there. That's public information. We've got a good operation that puts stuff out on Facebook, posting our meetings, talking about what's going on in the district. That's important. We're not just trying to sell the district or gloss it over. We're trying to get out there so the community is aware of what we do. And then, as I mentioned, the board meetings are recorded, archived, and available to the public. The public comment section of our meetings is a critical thing and have become one of the biggest challenges in local government right now. In Wisconsin, local government is nonpartisan, and I put that in quotes because the political parties have weighted in very heavily in this, so it's really hard to be nonpartisan. But the ideological differences, it's not just the political parties, there are others. And so there will be people who will show up very passionate about something, and they have a right to address the board. We've had to get a handle around that. It used to be pretty loose, but most school boards now across the state have set up guidelines. People can talk to us for up to 2 minutes, and then we don't have dialogue, okay? We take the information and thank them for being there, because once you start the dialogue going, the whole meeting can disappear very quickly. And they have the right to come in front of the board every time in front of our committee meetings. We have our committee meetings, we meet 3 times a month, so we'll have committee meetings on first Monday and second Monday, regular board meeting typically on the third Monday, although this month it'll be the fourth Monday, tomorrow night. And each of those will ask for public comment. People can come and talk to us, but we typically don't engage them unless there's something incorrect that was said there. Stacy might say something, but she will manage that. Part of the reason for this is, first off, we want to listen and not wade in right away and think about it. The other is just about every school board learned their lesson during COVID, where everybody had an opinion about masks, distancing, all of that, and with best of intentions. So for us, one of the ways we finally responded was Stacy asked the board, we held our meetings every Monday night for over 3 months. So not just 3 Mondays a month, every Monday night. I think 4th of July week maybe you didn't meet, but from the beginning of June into September, every Monday night in the high school auditorium, sometimes there were hundreds of people there, and sometimes the public comment would go on for more than 2 hours. Just, you can come down, microphones down in front, everybody's limited to, I think Stacy gave them more than 2 minutes, but you're limited. And it would be all over the place. Supportive, we need masks, our kids are gonna die, to you're choking our kids with masks, to crazy stuff, to really sincere stuff we were doing. But that's where we learned, if you don't control kind of what's going on here and your time and all that sort of stuff, it can really get out of hand fast, and then you get board members who are carrying on arguments and those kinds of things. So part of that is just having a structured and constructive public comment time. Sometimes stating the obvious and asking the obvious question can really help. So we can be really immersed in all the stuff that's coming as background to an issue. The report from the administration is fairly quick, and sometimes it's easy just to jump to a vote because we all know what they're talking about. We know the inside baseball, we understand the language. So sometimes, as board members, we'll stop and we'll start asking a few questions. I think we all understand this, but you're telling me that. And part of the reason we do that is so that we're sure we all know and understand. And we want to make sure that in the public record, it's that out there. In communication studies, there's a phrase referred to as active rehearsal. This is active rehearsal where we want to make sure we summarize it and say it a few times so people can understand it, and we don't rely so much on how people hear it themselves. Your board, any local board, really needs to reflect your community. So if your community is sort of diverse, your board ought to have some diverse voices on it. Because if it's not, you will constantly be challenged by people who don't hear their voice on the board. So, like I say, every vote doesn't need to be unanimous. It's like, well, we need all 7 people on the board who would definitely agree with us, okay? What you're gonna find is that most of the issues the board deals with are not partisan, they're not ideological, they have to do with roofs, budgets, hiring processes, policies, all those kinds of things that we really can can agree on. But if people don't hear those other voices on the board, they're likely to challenge you. So it's important that we have those and encourage that. So I often say with groups, you don't need votes as much as you need voices. Most of our votes are 7-0 because we've talked through stuff. We don't bring it to a vote until we finally kind of got to some place where we can agree. We have a few 5-2 votes, okay? But it's because we take the time and we sort of work through it, so there's some unanimity there. But so there, if you feel the board's going in the wrong direction, we're pretty much going the same way. So if you don't have the voice on there, the vote isn't going to matter as much. So you need voices more than votes. We also, to build and maintain community trust and try and avoid divisiveness, the board speaks with one voice publicly, typically. It's not, we're tied to that, but we've all pretty much agreed that if there's and this will happen periodically, not a lot, fortunately, at least since COVID. COVID was another whole story. My inbox was just full of emails then. But now, every once in a while, we'll get an email from somebody who will email the entire board, sometimes with a super long email about some issue, okay? The person who responds for the board is the board chair, Stacy Johnson-Myers. She responds for the board. That doesn't mean the rest of us can't, but if we start responding individually with different opinions than that, we need to be careful that now the board doesn't start to debate out there in the community outside of the board meeting and those kinds of things. So if we had a different opinion than what Stacy gave for the board, we might say something. But generally we speak with one, especially to the press. When somebody wants what's going on in that last board meeting and they want a board member to speak, we would look to Stacy to speak for us rather than individual board members. That's not an ironclad rule, but typically that's how it works. And you hear us as sort of one voice out there. We try not to represent constituencies. And constituencies, by definition, are small groups of either ideologically or philosophically that are different, especially when they're partisan. So a mistake a lot of board members make in other school boards is there's a group, they got their friends, they're their people, and they're the ones they respond to, and that's what they reflect when they're at the board meeting. Well, that's fine if you got that. We've all got that. We've all got multiples of those. But if that's your constituency and that's how you make your decision, okay, that makes it more difficult. We're all in this school board, most school boards, elected at large. So that means we need to respond, in my mind, philosophically, to the whole community and be careful about representing a specific constituency. You need to think more broadly, what are other people thinking here? Respecting chain of command, that sounds a little military, I guess, as I read that. Refer questions to the people who can solve the problems. So, for example, if someone calls me and thinks I'm their go-to guy every time they got an issue with their kid in school, or what's going on in the community, or something they heard on cable news, and now this must be going on in our school, so they think, all I gotta do is call Alan, Alan will fix this, okay? I'm not your fixer, all right? The first thing I'll do, so let me give you an example of an email I got a year ago or so from a local person who knows me. Alan, the cross-country kids, when they're out in the afternoon, keep running across my property when they're out there practicing. I've told the coach before last year that they shouldn't do, they at least should ask permission before they do this. This is a problem, can you do something about it? I respond, this person's name, thanks for contacting me. I'm copying David Crail, the activities director at the high school, with this email. Thanks for letting me know. David will look into this, he'll get back to you. If you've got any questions, let me know after that. Okay. Within the hour, the athletic director had responded to him and said, here's the deal, I talked to the coach apologizes, this wasn't something they were trying to do, etc. Rather than for me to call up the coach and kind of get in the middle, that's injecting drama into this. Now, if the athletic director had not responded, then we got a bigger issue. I'm not going to fix that. I will talk to the superintendent or the high school principal and say, you know, I'm not quite, doesn't seem this is getting fixed. So do the chain of command rather than blow this stuff up, and it works better, because then the administrators have more confidence. If the administrators think that every time something happens and they contact a school board member, now I've got to be careful of what all I'm doing, as long as, am I doing my job or not doing my job? And I can't report to, am I reporting to 7 school board members and the principal in the high school? Or how's this working? So we do that. And then as part of that, then hire the best administrators you can and support them. Because if you have the best administrators you can get, you're going to get a really good staff. Okay? And they're going to feel supported. And when you got a problem, put the administrator on an improvement plan and deal with it as you need to. In fact, I think probably an administrator might be quicker to be put on an improvement plan than some other staff members might be, if it ever comes to that. So I think it's important that the administration has a good working relationship with the board, and the board with the administration, but also trust but verify. You know, if there's a problem here, then deal with it. Don't just blindly take what the administration says. So often when there's an issue that comes in front of our board, it will come as a proposal, and typically Stacy will ask that there be an administrative recommendation, which is what we call. The administrative recommendation will come in front of the board. We'll talk about it, typically first in committee, and then if we feel like there's not a consensus here, we might say to the administration, often say to the administration, well, you've heard us talk about this tonight. Why don't you bring back a revised proposal at the next meeting? Okay, so they're listening and they're trying to think of what's going to float in the board and do this, rather than for us to try and rewrite the proposal at the board meeting. The administration feels supported. We feel like we're getting, because these are the experts, this is why you hire these people. They're really smart and they should know what they're doing. And if they don't, then you do something about it. So anyway, so I think in this day and age, we really have been pushed into our most basic instinct of tribalism. And think about your own tribe. Okay? Think about them. And I often am reminded of this. I just had an email exchange with my sister this morning, and I'm often reminded of when we were little, and she used to tell me, back when I was in junior high and she was younger, who died and made you the boss? Okay? When I was trying to tell her what to do, okay? Who made me right, okay? How from some divine right, did I come up with all the good ideas and the rest of you just are wrong, okay? So I think this notion of them, who's them? Because you're probably them to, well, you are them to somebody else. So I realize there's this Packer-Viking thing, and you can be loyal to the Vikings and loyal to the Packers. That's not a destructive thing, okay? But it's really intense, right? But unfortunately, that mentality gets carried into communities, and local government is one of the last bastions of where we still have some control over this. But it's creeping in, and this tribalism is creeping in, and I think that's one of our biggest challenges. So anyway, thank you. That's my...
Yeah, questions, or we can have a discussion, maybe open it up.
Sure.
If people have questions.
Questions or thoughts or anything.
Yeah.
How many people
There's 7 members on our board,
Oh, good.
and 2 are up each year, and you'll notice this year on your ballot, those 2 people are unopposed, and they're 2 really good people, Lindsay Curtis and Mike Miller. And I'm so envious because in all my years on the board, I'm in that sequence where there's 3 members up, and I've had to run every time. But I also respect the process enough to where I will ask for your vote. Okay, I'm not going to assume your vote. So every time I do campaign, and I do ask for it.
Right, and it's kind of interesting. I was on board from 1985 to 2002, and back then, if you think about the 80s and the 90s, that's when the baby boomers' children were going through school, and we had it called the boomlet. The boomlet. It was the boomers' kids. So in River Falls, Wisconsin, every other household had a school-age child in that household. If you roll the clock forward to today, it's about 1 in every 3, 1 in every 4 households. It's not half the households. So how do you maintain community support? The parents of the people of the children in our public school system really value our public schools. Families, we have good public schools. People really value them. But people who don't have children in schools don't have that first-hand touch of, hey, guess what? Greenwood Elementary is a pretty darn good school. Good things are happening over there. And it is phenomenal what goes on in our public school system. But the people who don't have children in schools, more and more, their opinion is being shaped not by what's happening locally in our schools, by what they're hearing from the outside. And as the funding situation for public schools changes dramatically, just the state of Wisconsin, if you look at the decrease in state level funding, state income tax, business taxes, whatever, there has been a real push since 2008 to lower taxes. Wisconsin's too high a tax rate state, actually from the mid-90s. This has been going on. If you lower taxes, and what's going on is incremental shifting the opportunity to support local public schools from the state to the local property taxpayer. If you don't have a kid in school and your property taxes keep going on and up, you start to think, what are we doing wrong at those schools? What are they doing wrong at those schools? They must be wasting my money that these schools are costing so much more than they used to cost. That's not the case at all. And in fact, I mean, what's happening is a shift from state income tax to support the schools toward local real estate taxes to support. And those state income taxes have been shifting more and more where the people who make more money pay a little less proportion and the people in the middle are getting squeezed. So the middle class is getting really squeezed on these taxes. One example I like to use is if you took, you're probably familiar with the revenue caps that were put on schools in the mid-90s. And back in the mid-90s, the state of Wisconsin said that the cost of education is going up faster than inflation. And it's going up faster. And so it's making Wisconsin a hard place for businesses to want to come and do business. So the state legislature put revenue caps. You may not gather in this more than X amount. And they said, you may only increase your budget basically by the CPI, the Consumer Price Index of the prior year. And that was from the mid-90s until 2009. In 2000, and it was okay. We could get by on that. We weren't going to expand. We weren't going to have a bunch more huge programs, but we could get by. 2009, our state legislature said, we're going to decouple that. We're not going to keep it connected to the Consumer Price Index. We're going to just tell you every year, state schools, or every 2 years with the state budget, how much you can increase your school budget locally. Long story short, if in 2009 it had stayed linked to the CPI, which would just get us by, right? Teacher salaries go up so much every year. Vast majority of our budget is the people who are in front of the children. If it had just gone up, that same thing, and not been decoupled, and the state legislature saying, oh, you only get X per student, for every child in the school district of River Falls today, if there were no decoupling in 2009, we would be getting $3,000 more per child per year to spend on the education. So we're not doing it. The school district is doing a great job educating our children with what we have, but we've had to cut many programs. One that has been particularly hard hit, and you think of these times when we want to build, many people want to build global understanding of other people. Our foreign language programs have been cut dramatically to the point where we are looking now at Spanish.
Yeah, but
and
French.
And French. And French. We used to have, when my children went through school here, we had Japanese, German, French, and Spanish. And travel programs started in the 7th grade. Children were exposed to all these languages in the 6th grade, and then they chose which path they wanted to go to. Now, people can say foreign language, that's not the end of the world, but and they're cutting everything they can get by without. And River Falls School District River Falls School District is one of the lowest state-funded school district in the state. And it was because things got locked in 1993, and we were very frugal. I was the board chair then, and our board was very frugal. We didn't tax a dime more than what we needed at that time. And we ended up getting punished for that, so we're kind of stuck at the bottom forever. So, but other school districts in the state are struggling mightily. So it's time to get out and support our public education, and how do we do that? I think with Alan's conversation today, we learned that this board has done an exceptional job of building trust, community trust in our board, in our school district. We have excellent administrators. We have a really solid board of education, and we're working hard to keep it that way in River Falls. So, Julia?
Thanks for the explanation, Allison. Given the tenor of the times and what we know happening at the federal level, and now you just explained the state level, is there been any thought process gone into trying to get a little bit ahead of the curve? Well, we're almost behind the curve already, but a little ahead by the board to say, let's have these information. I applaud so much your 40 information sessions on the resolutions, but I think people need to understand much of what Allison, you just shared about not just the value of public education, but so there could be a forum about what does this mean to our community to have at the federal level no education, and how that will quote unquote trickle down negatively. Is there talk about trying to do those kinds of forums?
That's a really good question, and a couple of levels. One is we do that periodically, and people don't show up, which is a really big challenge. But the other is we have this conversation just about every week, because if you haven't noticed, things change just about every week right now at the national level, but even at the state level, which is we're losing some attention to that because of all the stuff going on at the national level. We don't know. And this is going on at every level of government. It's going on with the most Republican member of Congress to the most Democratic member of Congress. They can agree on one thing. We're not quite sure what's happening here, but we are monitoring it. I think two comments to understand about where this goes. The groups we've got to get at are people, as Allison pointed out, don't have kids in the school. It's almost 3/4 of the voters in this district don't have kids in school. They need to see value in this, and we've been fortunate in that we've been able to pass these referenda, even though we're actually one of the lowest state-funded districts in the state, but our test scores would show that we're in the high end in the state. So we're already really, we're squeezing the blood out of the turnip here, but we're doing well what we've got. But I would say generally, we need to be talking to each other as much as anything, because often when we look for information, we're looking for confirmation bias, consciously or unconsciously. We're looking for confirmation bias. This is what I think, because I heard it, and they want information. So to listen to, I have a men's group at church, and we met last week, and one of the things we were talking about was courage, looking for examples. And I said, one of the things I think that's an example of courage is someone who is willing to actively listen to information from the other side. So for example, if you're an MSNBC person, how often do you watch Fox News and vice versa? Okay. First off, I would say cable news is junk. I don't watch any of it. I don't care which network it is. It's mostly junk. But how, or do you really listen? That takes courage for people to do that, because we're quick for our opinions. So I would say my summary statement is about life in general. And I think this really plays out in a community and how we build community trust. Most of us from our background and our childhood have some kind of trust issue, right? So does that carry into our community organizations as well? We're all in this life together, and none of us is getting out of here alive, okay? So unless we can figure out in the meantime how we'll work together and find solutions, okay, we're in trouble. We're in trouble. None of us is getting out of here alive, so while we're here, can we get along? And is this an apocalyptic time. Most of my background is in academic training is in history. Let's just take the 20th century. There are a number of people here who lived a long time in the 20th century. The 20th century saw two major pandemics, okay? Spanish flu and polio killed millions of people. Two world wars, bigger than the world had ever seen before, killed tens of millions of people. The greatest economic depression the world had ever seen, and that's just the first half of that century. Second half of that century was the Cold War, which we never should have survived. Never should have survived. Yet here we stand today, okay? Yet here we still stand. And it's, unless we panic, okay, we will somehow get through this. But the 20th century looks easy because it all happened, and it seems like it was planned to be that way. But at the time, it was pretty scary. Most of those kinds of things are pretty scary. So I think it's incumbent upon us to think about each other, to listen to each other, and to figure out what we can agree on and how we can move forward rather than stay in our bubbles. I think that's where an community organization will help us succeed. So.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alan. All right. Moving on, our next programs